lecture, so which is UX and UI defined. So we're going to dive a little bit more into those. Everything we just went over just now, we're going to have get a little more depth. So UX designers come up with a general concept, its structure, and the flow of interactions, as well as a variety of factors which influence positive or negative user experience. Then our UI designers are visualizers who find the best solution for visual performance of the object corresponding to the style, the environment, etc. So it's kind of like using a spooky font for, a new spa opening up. It doesn't work, just like in print design. User expectations and aesthetics need to be based on the already needed architecture, structure, and core factors of interaction. So when we have UX, this is what a wireframe looks like, in case those that may not look that. So it's essentially, I always call it a skeleton. We're getting to like the blueprint. So we're essentially just placing blocks as to where information elements will go. And then UI, we're just applying our colors, we're plunking our pictures in there, we're plunking our icons in there, etc. Just a fun little graphic. You folks can take a look at this later. The difference between a UX designer and a UI designer. So there's the thought process on a UX designer is more critical thinking and creative thinking still. There are lots of obviously creative people in the UX design world. And then the thought process is more creative thinking and convergent thinking. We're thinking more about colors and typography, and the UX designers, we're thinking more about tasks and scenarios. Scenarios being, that's like having, if you want someone to really want them to go to your shop, and that's your main focus on your website, you're not going to have a button that directs them to the shop down low, hidden where they can't find it. The scenario is you're going to want them that to be up front and center. So this is where these little things come in handy. The UX experience design. So funny enough, this is a picture Michael took at Mohawk. So they built this beautiful sidewalk, and this is where you generally would think people would go. But from research and obviously from history, it's showing that people go this way. So that's essentially like UX design. Same thing, the whole Heinz ketchup. One looks really beautiful, one's much more functional. User experience design is the process of enhancing customer satisfaction and loyalty by improving the usability, ease of use, and a pleasure provided in the interaction between the customer and the product. I'll bother reading the rest of that. So now we're going to consider this. You're going to paint a room, and we just go ahead and buy the paint and start slapping on the walls. Some might, but a UX designer looks at a room very carefully. Maybe the room is very dark and would benefit from a lighter shade. Maybe the color of paint would affect the people using the room. So those are where a UX designer's brain would go. And once those decisions are made by surveying and asking the questions, say for instance, to the people that be using that room, the correct paint color and the walls that will be painted are selected. So think of a room, say at Mohawk. They want to paint it and they're saying, we're thinking of painting this fuchsia like pink. They're going to run through some surveys for people to see who likes fuchsia pink. Then they might get people's feelings on when they see that fuchsia color pink. Does it make them feel calm? Does it make them feel at ease? If it's fuchsia pink, but it's maybe very dark, it's a room with no windows. So you'll need to think about that. Well, there's no windows in here. So now that room's going to be a little bit darker. So that's where that UX designer brain is going to come in handy. Bring a plant in there. What kind of lighting is going to? So really thinking about every single scenario and working through all of those kinks ahead of time before you jump in. I certainly know that I have jumped into picking a paint color and then gone, that was a bad decision. So what does the UX designer do? So their job is to make sure a web product will be successful before it's actually coded and or gone to the visual portion of things. So we're making sure every button is in the right place. Everything is taken care of ahead of time. They make sure the experience a web user has when navigating a website It flows effortlessly. It doesn't confuse a user based on the goals of the product. Again, thinking about, for instance, that shop. What are the goals of this website? I need people to get to my shop. To make sure a user can complete the tasks. So that's where some testing comes in. So if you say want them to come to your website to sign up for a newsletter, you want to make sure that they can complete that task. When they get to the site, they have the ability to do that and they see that right away. Again, always thinking of that goal, a task, etc. And then they identify any issues a user may have performing them. You can do that through surveys and user testing, and then that's where we fix them. So what do they do? Their job can involve many different areas of research. So again, user research, we touched upon this in the other lecture, personas, information architecture, testing, and then usually a repeat. We go back to maybe our personas. We'll get into personas in a couple, I think maybe next week. So a little bit more on UX if you do want to, if you're still feeling a little bit clouded as to what that is. Like I said, there's the first couple projects that we'll be doing. We'll be diving into UX. UI. So again, there's XD and there's UI. So we've got, we sit down and we figure out what color our buttons are going to be. We figure out what our imagery with say it's profiles it's going to look like. We figure out what our buttons are going to look like, what our checkboxes are going to look like. So UI design, interface design is a design of user interfaces for maximizing usability and the user experience. The goal of interface design is to make sure the user's interaction is simple and efficient as possible. So while UX and UI designers can share a lot of the tasks in the process, the main job of the UI designer is to build a finished comp of the product. UI designers are more concerned with the visual look and feel, branding, interactivity, design, and overall. It's not to say they're not concerned about other things, because we still need to think about when we are doing those visual things, building out that visual look and feel. We always still want to make sure that we can see what we understand what is needed. So it's almost like, what color should a button be? We don't want to have a button that's green if we want them to stop. We don't want a button that's going to be red if we want them to go, etc. Things like that. So a UI designer will build out pages of a website in both desktop and mobile formats, always. Obviously, unless you're doing an app that's strictly mobile. A UI designer will also create prototypes of the comped version of the web product to test with users and proof with the client. So that's loads of fun. When we get into prototyping, you're going to love this. So again, the UX and UI, the difference between them in a little graphic. Your process, I'm not going to bother reading all of that. Some tools, again, went through that over in the previous lecture. But again, for design and prototyping, we're going to just use XD because it's all built in there. And again, it's right in your suite. And then some more links there. Any questions?